Hello and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Here's a look at some of the stories we've been following for you today. Congress has reached a deal on a government funding bill that's worth $1.5 trillion. They're also approving a White House request to spend billions in emergency money to support Ukraine. Dozens of the world's biggest companies are cutting ties with Russia, affecting every corner of the economy. We'll tell you some of those household names coming up. When it comes to producing energy in the United States, can it be done without disturbing the environment? We have two members of Congress that will weigh in. On Capitol Hill today, lawmakers agreed to spend $1.5 trillion, most of it for annual government spending, but it also includes tens of billions of dollars in emergency funds. Some of that money will go to support Ukraine. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details on Congress's latest spending.
Half a year late, top lawmakers have reached a deal on their annual government funding bill. This deal comes after Congress has had to settle for short-term fixes 3 times in a row for failing to reach agreements.
We came up with a bill, it's $1.5 trillion that will be spent this year.
This includes over $13 billion in emergency money to support European allies and Ukraine for humanitarian, security, and economic assistance.
The spending bill comes at a consequential moment. War in Europe has focused the energies of Congress into getting something done and getting it done fast, quickly.
The White House also requested Congress to spend another $15 billion for pandemic response. But late Wednesday afternoon, congressional leaders had to strip this because of disagreements over how to offset the costs of the new spending.
The Republicans insisted that every penny for the COVID be offset.
Democrats are now aiming to pass more pandemic money in the months ahead. The rest of the money will fund government agencies. Democrats and Republicans came to an agreement by spending more, with increased funding for both of the parties' top priorities. Democrats are happy with more spending on the home front, a $400 per student raise for the Pell Grant, nearly $300 million for affordable housing projects, $3 billion for homeless assistance, and historic investments in renewable energy. And Republicans praise the bill's ban on using federal money for abortions, and the $782 billion set aside for defense. But one conservative group is urging Republicans to hold back their vote and not to settle for what they call small victories. And here's what House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy had to say about this.
I think Republicans look to, just like in the NDAA, the number of successes we had to modernize our military, to be able to protect from that stance. There's a lot of people that look at that's a positive. Not on the overall bill itself, no.
Still, top Republican senators say they expect this spending bill to get strong bipartisan support.
Melina, we know if they don't pass this by the end of the week, it could lead to a government shutdown. So do you expect Congress to act in time to prevent a shutdown?
Well, a government shutdown is not expected to happen because there is a backup plan in the works right now, just in case lawmakers can't completely pass that full funding bill and get it off to Biden's desk for his signature before Friday when the government funding runs out. Lawmakers are also planning to pass another temporary funding bill that would extend the funding until early next week, just in case negotiation talks do drag until then. But it's important to note that this would be the 4th time that Congress has had to temporarily extend government funding because they couldn't come to agreements on a full annual funding bill. And once this newly agreed upon annual funding bill is passed, it will only fund the government through the next 7 months until September. And that's because Congress was half a year late passing this appropriations bill. Steve, back to you.
Thanks for that, Melina. Dozens of international companies are shutting down their businesses in Russia in response to the war. The Kremlin is accusing the U.S. of starting an economic war against Russia. Some of the world's biggest companies in the areas of auto manufacturing, finance, retail, big tech, and fast food are spending or reducing their operations in Russia. Some famous names include McDonald's, Starbucks, and Coca-Cola. President Biden Tuesday imposed a ban on Russian energy imports as gas prices rise to record highs. In a conference call with reporters on Wednesday, a Russian government spokesperson said the U.S. is responsible for starting a so-called economic war. When it comes to U.S. energy independence, the issue can be complex, with multiple factors driving policy. There's domestic politics at play, but there's also a huge element of foreign governments posturing and positioning, because oil is an international commodity. Here to offer some perspective on this is Ohio Congressman Bill Johnson. Congressman Bill Johnson, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Good to be with you this morning. Thank you.
Now, Congressman, in a press release yesterday, you charged that when it comes to Russia, the actual Russian interference is against the United States is when it comes to energy. If you could, tell us what you mean by that.
Well, a report that was released by the Science, Space, and Technology Committee back in 2018, when it was under Republican leadership, found that dating as far back as 2011, Russians had begun channeling money to activist groups throughout Europe to force getting away from fossil fuels. For example, France banned hydraulic fracturing for natural gas in 2011. Bulgaria did the same thing in 2012. The Netherlands in 2015. Germany did it in 2015. And the UK did it in 2019, all the while becoming more and more dependent on the Russians for their energy resources, natural gas. It is. There's also evidence in that report that the Russians have done the same thing here in America, funding activist organizations that have tried to impact and influence American energy policy. And you see it playing out today in the Biden administration, trying to bring us to a point where we can't harvest our natural resources of oil and gas and coal and even nuclear. I mean, there's moves to shut down nuclear energy here in our country.
Now, Congressman, you touched upon it there when you mentioned these activist groups. I think a lot of people, don't realize that the green energy lobby is real and big, because it comes across as a very noble cause to save the environment, which we all want to do. But when money is involved, things change. So how big is this green energy lobby in Washington?
Well, it is big. How big the Russian influence is, that remains to be seen, and that's exactly what we need to find out. The evidence that I've seen says that Russia spent over $90 million, the equivalent of $90 million, funding those activist groups in Europe to accomplish what they did there. So we need to dig into this and find out if they've been channeling that money to green energy activist groups here in America. Look, I'm a farm boy. I believe that we need to keep the air clean, the water clean, the land clean. I'm all about protecting our environment because that's how we grow our food, and we've got to be able to feed our people. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Fossil fuels have raised more people out of poverty across the globe than any other energy source on the planet. And America has done more to reduce carbon emissions and to address climate change than any other nation on the planet. And to ruin our economy and allow Russians to interfere with our energy policy is appalling to me, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
Now, Congressman, in Los Angeles, we're seeing $7 per gallon. Where does this all end, and do you see a breaking point where the Democrats get on board with drilling and fracking in the U.S., and does this become a political liability for them?
Well, I suspect it has been probably 4 decades, maybe even more, since Joe Biden ever filled up his gas at the gas pump himself. I suspect that is true. So I think it's going to take colleagues, both in the House and the Senate, who have to go home and face their family, have to face their communities, have to face their businesses, their constituents who are paying these outrageous gas prices. And I think you're going to begin to see the Biden administration coming under increasing pressure to wait a minute. We were energy independent just a few short months ago. Under the previous administration, we were producing 13 million barrels of oil per day. The Biden administration could do some things today to turn this around.
Congressman Bill Johnson, thank you.
Thank you.
5 Democratic governors are asking lawmakers to suspend the federal gas tax for the rest of 2022. Governors from Pennsylvania, Michigan, Colorado, New Mexico, and Wisconsin are responding to skyrocketing gas prices. In a joint letter, they're urging Congress to pass the Gas Prices Relief Act. The act would authorize the U.S. Treasury to transfer money to the Highway Trust Fund, which normally collects money at the pump via a gas tax. The alleviation of the tax would help households grapple with increased gas prices while they pay for other necessary daily expenses. Idaho is a state rich in natural resources, and the people from that state understand the importance of extracting those resources in a responsible way. Congressman Russ Fulcher is one of Idaho's 2 members of the House of Representatives. We sat down with him earlier to discuss. Congressman Russ Fulcher, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
My pleasure.
Now, Congressman, I want to ask you, there's been a lot of spin lately in the news coming, from all different places. One of those things is the talk of 9,000 federal permits that have been waiting for, federal land to drill on. Can you parse through this and tell us exactly what that means and put it into context?
I guess that's what you say when you're looking for an answer to why you're shutting down your own production of oil and authorizing the purchase from your enemies, because there's really no truth to it. What people need to understand is if you're going to explore for oil or energy, it takes a lot of applications, and you have to do the application before you know, in some cases, that there's any resource there. And so there's applications all over the place, but that's an application to try to explore in a lot of times. So it's really just that. It's spin. It's not the truth. It's not accurate in terms of what it sounds like. That's just a way for people to try to explain, it's their fault, not our fault.
Now, Congressman, gas was on a steady incline before this Russian conflict. You can see it when you look at the chart. It's obviously been exacerbated because of the conflict. Yesterday, President Biden has banned Russian oil. Is this a step in the right direction, or what needs to still be done?
Definitely a step in the right direction, but I do want to point out he went kicking and screaming on that. He did not want to do it. He could see the train coming down the tracks, I think, because Congress was going to run over him. Even the Democrats wanted to stop purchasing from Russia. It's just too bad of an optic right now, and it's just too bad of a signal to send. But to your point, we had rising gas prices well before the conflict with Ukraine. And it goes back to the first day when the president was sworn in. He started putting regulations and a chilling effect, significant chilling effect on production here in the U.S. That put the wheels in motion for these rising prices. And the other thing about that is this is a tax on everybody. We keep hearing the president say, in the State of the Union, we're not going to raise taxes on anybody who makes less than, say, $400,000 or whatever the number was. No. There's a tax right now. It's called increase in fuel prices, an increase in prices at the grocery store. So this is just bad policy, and it's our job to try to turn that around.
Now, Congressman, in a state like Idaho, I'm sure you guys cherish your natural beauty and the fresh air and whatnot. So on that note, when it comes to special interest, a lot of people like to talk about big oil, things like that. Is there also special interest on the other side in terms of climate change and this green energy initiative?
Well, it exists, but the point that I'd like to raise is that no one cares about the environment. No one cares about the place that you live than those who are there. And we do care about that, and we do give that attention. And so the so-called environmental community has impacted Idaho. They've impacted other states around the country by telling this lie that somehow they, from some eastern state or some remote place, know better about how to manage your resources than those of us who live there. And it's just absolutely false. And so part of our intent, part of my intent with this bill and with other pieces of legislation and other efforts is to say, no, the real environmentalists, those who care the most, are the people who live there, who work there, who depend on that resource for generations to come. And it's not the so-called environmental community trying to impact us.
Congressman Fulcher, thank you.
My pleasure.
Countering China's tech threat, that's what President Biden aimed to do today in a meeting with America's top tech firms. Where is he getting stuck, and what needs to be done? Today, President Biden signed an executive order on what he's calling the responsible development of digital assets. The move signals a U.S. government acknowledgment of crypto as a form of legitimate currency. On Tuesday, a major cybersecurity company revealed that a CCP-affiliated hacking group has targeted 6 U.S. state governments. We'll bring you the details. Hello and welcome back to NTD's Capital Report. Get it done. That's what the president is saying today as he pushes for a bill aiming to boost U.S. competitiveness. NTD's Iris Tao has more.
It matters. So let's get it done.
President Biden is making another push to pass legislation aimed at boosting U.S. competitiveness with China.
Companies are ready to do more, a lot more, if Congress passes the Bipartisan Innovation Act.
Inviting leaders of top U.S. tech firms to the White House, Biden on Wednesday asked them to speak out and urge Congress to address their needs, especially regarding a semiconductor shortage.
They're found in almost every one of our appliances, and they're absolutely critical.
Versions of the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act have passed both the House and the Senate, but lawmakers have been slow on getting together to resolve the differences and get it to Biden's desk. The bill includes billions of dollars to boost semiconductor production in the U.S. and domestic manufacturing overall.
It's been said that speed kills, and in this sense, slow speed kills. We need to get this done. We need to get it on your desk. We need to get it signed so that we can not just catch up with the competition, but lead.
Biden also invited governors of 2 manufacturing-heavy states, Michigan and Indiana. They said producing more domestically will also alleviate other bottlenecks, such as price increases.
In places like Michigan, this is about creating good-paying jobs. This is about lowering costs for families. This is about our national security.
The push comes as Beijing rushes to build a domestic supply chain for semiconductors immune to U.S. sanctions. And Biden has been stressing the need for the U.S. to win the competition of this century.
To put us on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century that we face with the rest of the world, particularly China.
Meanwhile, China has been a major supplier of chips for Russia before its invasion of Ukraine. And the U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo warned on Tuesday that major Chinese chip makers will be cut off from U.S. equipment and be essentially shut down if they violate the current ban on exporting chips to Russia. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
And President Biden today signed an executive order detailing the first ever federal guidance on cryptocurrency. The move signals the legitimacy of the digital asset as a form of currency. Biden's order asks government agencies to take steps toward understanding the risks of crypto and capturing its potential. Key government agencies named in the executive order include the Treasury and the Commerce Departments. The agencies will present policy recommendations that mitigate the risk of and take advantage of digital assets. The White House says the resulting policy will promote the U.S. as a world leader of technology and economic competition. However, some argue that this move has been made to subject cryptocurrencies to more federal regulation. Bitcoin was up 8% earlier on the day upon the news. Congress passed a bill to overhaul the Postal Service after the Senate voted 79-19 yesterday. It's now ready for President Biden to sign. All Democrats and many Republicans voted for the bill, which would ensure mail delivery 6 days per week.
What this does do is it saves the post office, which is incredibly important to all of our constituents, to our veterans who get their prescription drugs through the mail, to people who are voting by mail.
The bill ends a requirement that the Postal Service finances workers' health care benefits 75 years ahead of time. Instead, future retirees would be required to enroll in Medicare. Some Republicans opposed adding costs to Medicare.
This legislation would add at least $6 billion in new costs to Medicare without any plan to pay for it. $6 billion, no plan to pay for it. And at least $5 billion to our federal debt, a debt that's already surging above $30 trillion.
On Tuesday, cybersecurity company Mandiant revealed that Chinese hackers working for the Chinese Communist Party compromised networks of 6 state governments in the United States last year. According to Mandiant's website, a state-sponsored espionage group used vulnerable internet-facing web applications as their initial foothold into networks. The Chinese Communist Party-affiliated group targets both public and private organizations. Did Amazon lie to Congress? That's what House lawmakers are saying, and now they want the Justice Department to investigate. In a letter to the Attorney General on Wednesday, members of the House Judiciary Committee say a senior executive lied about how the company used the data it collects from third-party sellers. These lawmakers spent much of 2019 and 2020 probing Amazon for possible antitrust violations. Amazon claims it doesn't use data from third-party sellers to figure out how to make its competing products. But according to this letter, lawmakers don't buy it. Amazon hasn't responded yet. Amazon owns the Washington Post, one of D.C.'s most notable publications reporting on politics. A legal organization filed a lawsuit on behalf of 2 families of Catholic schools challenging D.C.'s child masking mandate. Alliance Defending Freedom attorneys argued that on February 14, 2022, Mayor Muriel Bowser announced that she would lift her mandate to wear masks indoors in Washington, D.C., such as crowded bars, restaurants, concert halls, and sports venues, which are attended by thousands of people. And yet the children who attend Catholic schools in the district must continue to wear masks in their classrooms throughout the day. The attorneys said that it's unequal treatment for Catholic schools. Currently, masks are still required indoors at all D.C. public schools for students, staff, and visitors. That's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. Thank you for tuning in. From Washington, D.C., I'm Steve Lance, and we'll see you tomorrow.